We also know we need to modernize the process. Right now, this is an example of a paper, pencil, fax, postage stamp system that can lead to a lot of, I think, a lot of confusion. As we modernize and digitize that system, I think we will see some ease in the bureaucracy and the ability to free up daycare licensing reps' time to focus on what we need them on the relational end of things, right, where we know that there's some confusion in the field. Those at least are two of the pieces. The last one that I say, and I think I'm happy to come back or have a follow-up conversation once we hit FY27 on what our operations infrastructure looks like. Right now, we ask a lot of the daycare licensing reps. They have to do the visits. They have to do investigations. They have to manage the licensing exempt process. There are a lot of there's a lot on their plate. I think we are trying to make sure that we are simplifying and focusing the operational infrastructure so they can focus on just some pieces of that while we build infrastructure for other pieces. Is there anything else you'd add?
Can I follow up with that?
Sure.
Then, are those reps that do the daycare licensing or childcare licensing, home-based licensing, are they coming from DCFS then into? Do you see that as being a little bit of a challenge with how things were done at DCFS compared to now the vision and the mission and what you want to accomplish? Like, what are you going to do to handle that?
I appreciate the question. We, maybe about a year ago now, hired a chief quality and safety officer to help us who came from DCFS, to help us build out what will be the quality and safety division that includes licensing, more support around licensing exempt, more support around business startup, and eventually a year from now, background checks. So we are attempting to, I think, disentangle and focus on those core elements that daycare licensing reps are doing that were all handled under, this is hundreds of staff, and really bring focus, attention, communications, just like all of the programs, a lot of support and integration. I don't know if there's more.
So last question, I'm sorry.
Sure. It's okay.
So if there is an issue with the things that were irregular when it comes to what the daycare licensing person says from one rep to another, what recourse do those daycare providers have? Because it's frustrating and they want to quit, and that's what I'm hearing. So I know you're aware of this, but I think that this is a bigger challenge than probably. I hope we're not underestimating the challenge with this, because I think it's going to be a big challenge.
I appreciate that. We've, I think, heard that too, that the biggest point of tension, biggest place of communication where there's misalignment, any questions or complaints will come in directly to us. We are building out a customer service infrastructure that DHS had that will now be built out for the whole agency, in part to route some of these questions. And we've learned from other states, it was probably a year ago at this time that we talked to Ohio, the same issue in other states. This is not just an Illinois problem, and we are learning about what they are doing around training for childcare licensing reps, and we will start to implement some of those things over time.
Is this going to cost additional money for that, though? Like, do you have money built in and resources built in to do that? Because I think it's going to be a challenge.
I am sure it will be a challenge. We have built in, I think, to both a credit of the Assistant Secretaries, Casey Strauchland and Wayland, a lot of change management work, knowing where we are bringing over staff from 3 different agencies. I can't tell you right now what I will say 6 months from now, but we have attempted to be very diligent and focused on these operational pieces, so that way we can bring relief to the field here.
Okay, thank you for taking all my questions.
Senator Walker, did you have a question?
Thank you. Let me just say I'm delighted that this exists, and I'm delighted you're in charge of it. But I'm going to ask about the budget as opposed to operations. The when I tried to reconcile changes to other departments where functions had been planned to be moved, I noticed what you were investing, but I couldn't reconcile that with reductions in the other agencies' budgets. And so I'm curious about how you formed this budget. And related questions are there natural efficiencies through consolidation that save us money? Or is your expansion of mission such that, and lack of deductions in other people's budgets such that this is an added expense over time?
Appreciate the question. On slide 11 of our deck, we try to outline exactly which headcount, how many headcount is coming from the State Board of Education, DHS, and DCFS, and how much of the money is coming out of their budget directly into our budget, our programmatic expenses. So part of it is outlined here in what's coming over from those agencies. On the efficiency question, well, I'm going to come to the efficiency question. Right now, we are still in transition. We will be in transition, as Senator Capel, for a while as we build out the operational infrastructure that works. Some of those costs in our operational budget are one-time costs. For example, we have to maintain current technology and processes until we have new technology and processes in place. Then we will see some ease. I think we've said in the last 2 years, and I would say again this year, part of what we will see in efficiencies doesn't mean that we will be able to maximize how our dollars are spent in serving children and families. That's where I think we will see greater efficacy and efficiency in the system. I can't speak to necessarily next year's budget. I'm happy to have Ann or Tom or Casey jump in here, but we do know we have one-time transition cost that inflates our operation budget this year, and doesn't mean it will be done in FY27, but we will start to see some shift over time in what we need from our technology budget and some of our operations budgets. Thank you.
We're going to go to Senator Guzman.
Thank you so much for coming before us. I have like 3 buckets of questions real fast. So the first one, I think just looking at the some of the pre-packet, it hit me. I think earlier in the year when we were really talking in our communities about the impact of the funding freeze. Talk about community-wide trauma. Providers and parents and many folks that I think it really brought to light just how perilous this environment is in terms of funding, how deeply desperate our communities and parents are in terms of this as a lifeline for how they get to work. So just thinking about the weirdness of the space that we're in, where we're basically kind of being held afloat by the pending litigation, how are you all thinking about if those findings come in a different way? One, what have we learned about how our community assets might need your support? And 2, what does centralizing that guidance in a shifting environment look like, as you all are obviously starting to take on the possible legal burden of that if the lawsuit is still in place when you fully become IDEC, as we are describing it now?
Appreciate the question on the impact we've seen around even just the threats of the freeze of funding. For us, we know we are supporting small businesses and women-run businesses across the state, and the child care funding is a critical, sometimes only revenue source for those businesses. Just the threat of it, I think, can cause questions, trauma, whether or not what they're operating on thin margins, whether or not that revenue will continue. So we know, and that is in part what we've heard. In January, we were heavily engaged and continue to be in coordinating with our sister agencies. We will continue to do so with DCFS, who was in charge of making sure that they issued non-regulatory guidance. Same thing with the State Board of Education. We will continue to be in close relationship with them to make sure that we're coordinating communications to providers, whether they're homes, centers, school-based providers. We have learned that communication is key, right? Just being able to share. We know we're hearing a lot of things in the news, being really clear with our partners who are trusted messengers. We are here to support our providers and our intermediary local agencies, like we met with in just last week, who have the trusted relationships with families and with providers to support them and making sure we're communicating what is happening, what's real, and what we just don't know yet. And that is, I think, a really important lifeline and communication line, so that way none of us are guessing at what's happening. I think we will continue to operate in that space of providing guidance. I will say, we will continue to operate in that space. And if there is a freeze in funding, our programs just will not look the same as they do today. There's no way for us to kind of withstand that kind of potential loss of funding.
Thank you. And I think in a related way, just thinking about the North Star for much of IDEC, specifically early intervention. I think the story that I bring from home is my goddaughter's little sister, who thanks to EI is now speaking for the first time. We're getting to celebrate her saying water. It's a really hard word. And she has motor skills that she didn't have 9 months ago. We're doing a lot of things that we weren't doing. I want the same for all of the littles that right now we have really severe backlogs for, and I understand conceptually why we're flat funded, but that doesn't feel good in terms of, I think, mission to impact. So can you speak to, within the frame of the budget that you have, what are we doing to maximize EI, knowing that we have families all across our state that are desperately needing that service right now?
Appreciate the question. I will say early intervention has been one of our priorities from day one. We know how important it is and we share a vision, right? We want every little who needs services to have access to those services. We have made sure that we are doing a thorough understanding of our current state to understand where we know we need to make operational and other investments. That's in part why I highlighted we've done an analysis. We know where we need to hire. We have in the governor's proposed budget the resources to hire additional staff into the early intervention program. In the governor's introduced budget, there is also an additional $15 million for early intervention. It is the one program that's not a maintenance. $5 million is maintenance. $10 million is to help us improve our early intervention system, which we know, again, will not be overnight, but we know the return on investment for families, for early childhood special education that's run by the State Board of Education, and for school districts, we've seen when we have successful interventions, decreased reliance on special education resources in school districts over time.
Thanks, and promise, last question. Thinking, I know I asked you this in the time that we had allotted yesterday, and thanks for that advance time, but thinking specifically about the population of English and multilingual learners, I think the concern that I lifted was, when will we see a director of bilingual ed that is hired and is a part of IDEC? So I'm wondering if you could speak publicly about that.
Sure. I think we will see in FY27 someone designated to steward, whether they have that title or not, to make sure that they are holding the whole of supporting multilingual businesses that need multilingual services, bilingual education across the agency, while we make sure that we have the right hire over time. So in FY27.
Thank you. And I think I shared with you in my closing comment here that, oversight and continuity specific to this role, but many of the transitioning roles that IDEC is onboarding is one of the things that I've heard from advocates, and I think I'm looking forward to how you all continue to maneuver those stakeholder relationships as you socialize the North Star that IDEC is, but also just how do we intake, what is change culture? So
yes,
thanks for that.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Balkema. You're good? All right. Senator Rose.
A couple quick things. First of all, your enthusiasm is infectious. Thank you, especially this late hour. I am access, and I share everything Senator Capel said, who apparently is my new best friend. I don't know, from our committee before, voted for her bill. Shocking, I know. But we don't have any daycare providers anymore because everybody just says they're not going to put up with the BS. That doesn't mean we don't have daycare providers. We got all kinds of daycare providers. But they're all under the radar. They're not licensed because they have had it with the BS. We're here to serve people, not make their lives miserable. So as you take this over, please just know most of these mom and pops, which is literally what they are, aren't used to all this rigmarole. And your inspectors and licensors and all those other people need to help them get these businesses up and running, not just look for any reason to shut their businesses down. Safety, we're all on the same page. But, you know, when I got a business that invests literally $1 million in a building and they get shut down because by a cloth tape measure, they're an inch short of what the reg says, despite having an architect having a laser level stamping it was an inch longer than the actual cloth tape measure, I don't want to hear about it. So we need to remember who we serve. Second point, access. Our EI programs in Downst Illinois, it's very hard to get EI programs. And there's a bunch of different groups, but they all seem to be going in these, you know, no one's rowing the boat in the same direction. I know that's why you're here, but it doesn't do any good to have all these rules and regs and all the thought and all this other stuff when there's nobody doing the service. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other members? I just had one on technology. We've talked about it before. We have other agencies that are in the midst of big temporary or technological overhauls and aren't very successful. What's been your experience so far, and what's your estimate? Are you going to be prepared technologically to take on all that responsibility?
Yeah. I appreciate the question. I would say we have a very strong partnership with Do It. We have learned a lot from our sister agencies on what to do and what not to do, so appreciate that we have convened them pretty regularly. We are set right now to seamlessly transition our kind of legacy technology to make sure that we're keeping the lights on as we are building out the new technology. Right now, the tech is the little bit of the tail wagging the dog for our operations. It's true for EI. It's true in many areas where we know we need increased investment. That said, I'll be clear. I think there's no way for me to foresee just like with the federal administration exactly what might surprise us in the next 78 days. We have built, I think, a robust partnership with all of our agencies to mitigate that any potential risk that somebody's using a technology. So we will have IGAs and partnerships in place to make sure that transition is seamless.
All right. Anything based on that? All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And with no further business before the committee, the Senate Education's Appropriation Committee stands adjourned.